Hello, and thanks so much for joining the Invisible Americans podcast with Jeff Madrick and Carol Jenkins. We address the travesty of child poverty here.
There are nearly 13 million children living in serious material deprivation in America, and we don't see them. They are our invisible Americans, and we plan to change that.
A couple of words about us. The podcast is based on Jeff's book, Invisible Americans, The Tragic Cost of Child Poverty. He's an economics writer, author of 7, and co-author of another 4 books on the American economy.
And Carol is an Emmy-winning journalist, activist, and author, most recently president of the ERA Coalition, working to amend the Constitution to include women.
And we are longtime colleagues and friends. In today's episode, we zero in on child poverty in New York City and state and hunger in New York City. Dr. David Charities is a former New York City health commissioner. Chef Greg Silverman runs the city's major food bank, holding the line against ever-increasing food insecurity. We begin with Dr. Charities, who was health commissioner of New York City during the COVID pandemic. It was his comforting public reassurances that helped us all get through it. He is now a practicing physician and professor at City College. Recently, he and Dr. Mary Bassett, another former commissioner of health of both the city and the state, wrote a compelling op-ed expressing concerns that New York is falling behind in its commitment to cut child poverty in half by 2032. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today. We thought that your op-ed was right on point. Jeff, as you know, has been in the forefront of fighting for the end of child poverty, and I've been happy to join him in this podcast effort. So we're delighted to have you in conversation today. Your time as city commissioner, and as I saw you come up on the screen, you were so comforting to New Yorkers through the COVID experience. So we thank you for that. And now turning your attention full point to the children living in poverty in New York City. What's your assessment of where we are now?
Well, first, Carol, thank you and Jeff, most of all, for the work that you've done to bring attention to this issue. I've been so struck not just by the community that you've built, but also the way in which you have brought it to life, through storytelling, because this is an issue that we should all feel viscerally, right? This is not just a jumble of statistics or something that we should think about in the abstract. This is truly something that we should all feel. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about talking about children. Each of us, whether we are fathers and mothers ourselves or aunts and uncles, we all have a child in our life whom we love dearly. And we know the things that we want for that child. We want that child to be safe. We want them to have a full belly. We want them to have a safe place to live and a place where they can play and an excellent education. But the reality, as you've pointed out in this podcast, is that far too many go without those basic needs. And that is something that is a tragedy for each and every child who's experiencing it. But it's also something that dims the future for all of us. It is something that I feel very passionately about, and that I was privileged to get to write this brief essay with a dear colleague, Dr. Mary Bassett, who, like me, served as New York City's health commissioner. She also served as the state health commissioner, including through part of the pandemic. And both of us simply wanted to make the case that poverty is bad for health, period. And so for any of us who are committed to addressing health, we need to turn some of our attention to redressing child poverty as well.
Let me ask a slightly provocative question. Why did it take you so long to write this piece for the Daily News? Shouldn't this have been front and center for both of you for quite a long time.
Certainly, and it has been in so many ways. Although, the history of advocacy, of course, that you and many others bring to the field is one that, it's a distinguished lineage that we're hoping to just contribute to and advance, in the spheres that we have access to. The timing of the piece was very deliberate. On the one hand, we do have more national attention to the idea of, the child tax credit, which of course, we've seen some progress with, and then we saw dramatic advancements during the pandemic, which then, were reversed in so many cases. But we hear that in our national dialogue, coming into the fore once again. And then we also see in many cities and states conversations about the possibility that we can markedly reduce and even eliminate child poverty gain further traction. And so we wanted to sort of take our particular vantage point that we have in New York to call attention to the fact that we have all the ingredients here in New York State. We have a law that was passed in 2021 that lays out the target of reducing child poverty by half by 2032. I want to just underscore this because I think maybe many of your listeners may not be aware of it. This was passed while we were still in the fog of the pandemic. But it's really a striking thing, to have a governor and a legislature who have committed to that target. But at the same time, 3 years after that, there's been far too little progress at actually, advancing toward that goal. So we wanted to call attention to that. And we also wanted to make sure that people knew that this is an eminently soluble issue. From our experience during the pandemic, which of course was characterized by so much tragedy and grief and loss, we also saw bold change happening at the same time. I mean, you all are New Yorkers like I am. We built a field hospital in a tennis stadium. We marshaled the largest vaccination campaign in the history of our city. And across the nation, we reduced child poverty by half. So I think we have to remember that, even as sort of attention to COVID-19 and the pandemic has ebbed, perhaps for good reason in some cases, we are all experiencing kind of a collective amnesia about that time. But we need to remember that we accomplished big things and tap into that sense of volition to remind ourselves that they remain very possible. And these are choices that we, the everyday people, as well as our policymakers are making every day.
Doctor, what is the prescription? What are you calling on the governor and the assembly, all of our representatives to do? And how quickly can they do it?
The roadmap to reduce child poverty by half, by 2032 is something that is very possible. And we know what works when it comes to actually cutting child poverty. It's a solution that's elegantly simple. It's just putting money into the pockets of parents and caregivers. There's rigorous research that shows that these funds are used for basic needs like food and rent, and that parents spend it locally. There are different ways of operationalizing this. In New York, again, we benefit from the fact that same law, that 2021 law, created a Child Poverty Reduction Advisory Council, and they've now issued several reports. They're doing sophisticated modeling, showing some of the ways that we can actually get to that goal. Some of the recent modeling shows that increasing the state's existing child tax credit, there's already one on the books, but it would have to be increased significantly to about $3,000 per child per year, as well as making it available to children in New York's lowest income families. That would reduce child poverty in New York by 44%. And so that would get us almost all of the way, to that gap, to that goal of cutting child poverty in half. And these things, I think we have to make sure that we talk about these realistically and feasibly. We have lots of evidence that they are realistic. We can just look to other states, for example, a place like Minnesota, which has a child tax credit on the books that is already 5 times what New York's current child tax credit is, as well as the fact that these are investments. We can't think about them simply as outlays or costs. These are investments that have a very tangible economic return, as well as a return with respect to having stronger children, stronger adults, and stronger families for New York in the future.
When you say stronger, do you mean kids have higher cognitive abilities? I know that you mean they are healthier, but in what important dynamic are they healthier?
It has to do with both physical health and mental health. Both of these are rooted in the fact that we know those early years of a child life are so fundamentally important for cognitive development. Maybe one way to explain this is to just tell you, about a patient that I remember taking care of when I was a medical student in Philadelphia. This was many years ago now. It was one of the first patients I ever took care of, actually, and it was on my pediatrics rotation. He was a little boy. I think he was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and he came in with lead poisoning. I'll never forget him for a number of reasons. One is he had what are called lead lines on the gums in his mouth that sometimes occur when you have, higher levels of lead toxicity. And, I'll never forget that because it was such a visible reminder of how poverty gets under the skin. Children living in poverty are 3.5 times more likely to suffer from lead poisoning compared to other children. But even when we don't see it in the same way, when there are not lead lines, the effects of poverty get under the skin to affect the development of brains. For example, the way that neurons connect to one another. They are related, of course, to experiences of stress, and particularly, toxic stress as children experience it, which, for your listeners who may not be familiar with the notion of toxic stress, this is a condition characterized by excessive or prolonged activation of the physiologic stress response systems in the absence of the buffering protection afforded by stable, responsive relationships. So these are things that we have to understand holistically. In the same way, that patient that I took care of many years ago, that little boy, we can trace the ways in which the systems and structures of our society, and particularly the way that poverty manifests in an individual little girl or boy's life, results in cascading effects that matter over their entire life course.
You write about the effects of starvation and also of something like asthma in the Bronx and in Syracuse, for instance. The wide state of New York, you find those pockets where, poverty is really high. I think in New York City, it's 1 in 5 children is considered to be living in poverty.
Yes, that's exactly right. Many people may be surprised to learn because New York is a higher income state. But children in New York State are more likely to live in poverty than children in 40 other states. So we're in the bottom 10, from that respect. And even that doesn't get to the way in which there are certain communities in New York, 46% of children in Syracuse, 35% of children in the Bronx, and in Buffalo, in our current governor's home city, more than 1 in 3 children live in poverty. So these are just stark facts about how many children are experiencing the hardships that we're talking about.
Is the money just not available for these kids in New York, or is money a major issue that requires even more attention?
Money is available when there's will. We have to remind ourselves anytime there is a conversation about can we afford it, what the opportunity cost is, okay? And the opportunity cost of not addressing child poverty is what is too expensive for us to bear because of the downstream expenditures on healthcare, on public safety, on the avoidable consequences of not addressing child poverty. So don't get me wrong, this all has to be budgeted, and it will take significant amount of money to make this a reality, but we can't think about it as a cost. We have to think about it as an investment. And look, tell me what other investments have the dramatic return that we're talking about, over a person's life. And so when we start to think about it in that way, it makes sense, of course, for a child or a family, but also because of what it means for our future government budgets, as well as the productivity, that contributes to a functioning economy. So to me, the key frame when we're talking about money is this is an investment and not a cost.
And when is the next opportunity to divert funds into starving, unhoused, sick children? When do you see that next opportunity coming?
Well, Carol, I think there's always an opportunity, right? I think for New York State, the legislative session leads up to, the annual budget negotiations, which happens in the first few months of 2025. And so I think for people who are passionate about these issues, this has to be a season that we really push forward with respect to what we would like to see happen. In December, there will be another interim report of the Child Poverty Reduction Advisory Council here in New York State. There will be recommendations, issued as part of that. And so that's another, sort of time point for us to really focus attention on these sets of issues. And then I know your remit is beyond the state, and when we think about this nationally, we will be headed into, a major conversation about tax policy in 2025. And look, I'm a primary care doctor. I don't make it my business to think too much about tax policy, but we have to remember that in so many ways, economic policy is health policy. And so those of us who are committed to addressing health have to get smart and make sure that we're advocating not just for health insurance or not even just for addressing food insecurity, which of course affects health as well, but all the way to the economic contours that shape opportunities and health for so many children and families.
That's excellent. Thank you. We'll be consulting you about how much money you need. You can always ask us. We've been dealing with child poverty quite a long time, and especially the child tax credit. So we're pleased to see you guys are devoting so much attention right now to this issue, because once Congress reversed direction, we thought, there it goes, and kids suffer. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate your work, and thanks for the chance to speak about this today.
Thank you so much. Chef Greg Silverman is CEO of the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, at the apex of a food banking network that feeds thousands of food insecure New Yorkers. Distributed food here can be measured in the millions of pounds. That's how dire the hunger crisis is. We'll say to volunteer, donate, or receive services, go to their website, wscah.org. Here's Greg now. Chef Greg, it's so wonderful to have you on the podcast. We know that you say that will be always your identification as Chef Greg. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my background is a chef and restaurateur. So you cook every night for decades on the line, cooking with your team. It's who you are. And whether now I cook directly or now I feel like my job is to cook up change in the food emergency feeding system, it's all the same thing. And still get to cook for my wife and two daughters each and every night. So.
Right. And you said that your experience on the line helps you in getting the line working. And as we've told you, the Invisible Americans team came there. We were breaking down boxes and helping to fill boxes. It's quite an impressive assembly line. And, it works so well.
I think there's some elements I definitely take from the culinary world and the chef world. And I mean, I always say, like, everything I learned about making change, I learned on the line in the kitchen. Like, we all talk these days about innovation and strategic planning, but in the kitchen, we innovate every night. We create a special and we test it out. We pilot it. In the nonprofit sector, we think of innovation in longer terms and strategic planning. Every night in the restaurant, you or the morning, you build out a prep list and you complete every task on it. And it's like you go through strategic planning in 8 hours in some ways. So it's a very different world.
Now, and you said just before we came on the air that today was the busiest day that you've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, just in a singular distribution at 86th Street. I mean, we have 30 distribution points, but 86th Street is our original distribution point and still our largest. I think we had 782 families show up to get food, which just 6 years ago, pre-pandemic, we were serving 200 families a day. Height of the pandemic, it was what we thought was craziness at 400 families a day. Then after the pandemic, we were at 600 families a day and now seeing almost 800. It's amazing we get to distribute this kind of food, healthy food for our community in such numbers. But it's right, there's a obviously super sad side to that too, that the numbers are the side.
Right. I know we've talked with people who started working in food banks and said, soon enough, this will be over. We'll feed everybody and we can close down. And it seems not to be the case. The crisis grows bigger and bigger.
I would actually push back on anyone who thinks you're going to end hunger, right? Like the idea that the notion of working ourselves out of a job is a fallacy, and it's a poor model for running an organization. Our job is to help transform our communities and support that. And we do it by feeding people and decreasing food insecurity. The old models, these sort of massive food bank models, and we partner with a lot of food banks. But the notion that we track how good we do based on how many pounds we push out the door, how many people we serve, as opposed to like public health measures and how people are feeling about the food, like that's where we need to get to. So I don't think Whiska's never working itself out of a job because it's about community, and community will always need to grow.
So you had almost 800. And when this organization started, I think it says your predecessors fed 7 people, so that the organization itself has grown tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, even in my time in 7 years, when I came to Whiska, we had one distribution point, and we, in a sense, brought people from all over the city to food at 86th Street. The goal should always be about the customer experience, which means you don't bring people to food, you bring food to people. So we added upwards, by the time of the middle of the pandemic, we had 50, but like we have about 30 distribution points throughout the month across the city where our customers live. Instead of making people travel all day, they can stay home and then go quickly to pick up the food in their neighborhood. So they can be home, whether it's to get to their job or pick up their kids from school or babysit their grandkids or read a book or do whatever they want to do. Like that's what people should have a right to do. We deliver groceries now. We have 2,000 deliveries a month to people's homes. And that's the future, right? Giving people the conveniences that everyone deserves, not just those who have the economic means.
And I noticed that you began doing that with a hospital as patients were leaving home and unable to care for themselves. What are the qualifications for having your food delivered to you?
Yeah, this is an evolution with New York Presbyterian. We partnered with them for many years and bringing healthy food to community members in need. And at the same time, we've seen the research that we've had done through some of the researchers at Columbia Medical and through NYP showing that this, with infants getting this food with their parents, that they're lessening the trajectory of childhood obesity, right? These are really positive health outcomes. So if someone shows up now, right, at a New York Presbyterian emergency room and they screen positive for being food insecure, and they're a senior or they're a mom with a child 0 to 5, they will get asked if they'd like to have home delivered groceries, and they'll get sent that virtually get sent to us, and then we'll reach out to the person and say, would you like to have home delivered groceries? And we'll also do a benefit screening to see like what benefits are they eligible for, such as SNAP, food stamps, like what else can we help them with? So sort of helping the most vulnerable people who show up in emergency rooms who might not have access to even go to a pantry is what we're trying to do.
And I'm impressed by the amount of real food, vegetables, fruits, unpackaged things that you now offer to families. It used to be cans and boxes, period. That was the end of the story. And you've been able to diversify, what goes to the families, what they're able to pick up or get delivered to their home. I don't know, just organic, fresh food.
As I always tell this story, when I first got to Wisca, one of my colleagues, Juan, came in. He was receiving deliveries, and he said, Greg, I don't think you're going to like what just got delivered. And what had been dropped off was a truckload, like multiple, like 10 pallets, probably like 15, 20,000 pounds of food. I shouldn't say food. It was ultra processed foods. It was sugar sweetened beverages. It was hamburger helper. It was rice-a-roni and these kind of things. And I was like, I know from my more national nutrition education work that like these are products that are like 40% of your sodium for the day. And what this is crazy. Like in our pantry, we have ground beef and ground turkey. We got tomatoes. We got tomato paste. We have canned tomatoes. We have noodles. We have everything you need for rice-a-roni or a hamburger helper, except the salt, right? That seems, I don't know what's in this packet. And so I called up the people who gave it to us and said, I need you to do a pickup. And they said, we don't do pickups. And so I put a post on social media and said, sometimes folks do more harm than good when they sacrifice people's long-term health in exchange for poundage. And so we fought back and forth on this. And after the weekend of going back and forth, we finally agreed. I said, I'm never taking down this social media post because that's all they cared about. I said, I'm never taking down the post, and you're picking up the food or I'm going to send out a lot more social media posts. And they picked up the food. And they said, and you're never going to get food from this delivery ever again. Very quickly, our poundage went down that we were distributing. Like we went from bringing in, say, 1.3 million pounds of food to 1.2, like we lost like 100,000 pounds of food. But our percentage of fresh produce jumped from 15% to 25%, like overnight. Oh, this is all we have to do. So we started just refusing unhealthy product and finding more distribution channels to get fresh product. And now we give out 52% produce, fresh produce. Now we give out 5.4 million pounds of food this year. And over half of that, like almost 3 million pounds, will be fresh produce. And our customers have never been happier, probably healthier.
Incredible. People are always asking, though, even though you know that we're not going to end hunger, even though that's what many of us are working towards that. What's your assessment of what has to be done? And I know that you have innovated alliances. You have the round table. You're working with other food banks, gaining that clout of working together. But as we do this in conversation towards the end of 2024, what do you see as the next steps that need to be taken here? The hungry population is getting worse, bigger.
On the micro level, maybe it's the macro, like collaboration is key, right? We at the Westside Campaign Against Hunger helped found the Roundtable, which is a collection of 9 of the largest emergency food providers in New York City, all frontline providers. And we share everything. We share standard operating procedures. We share purchase data. We'll purchase food together by the truckload. We'll do whatever it takes because we're not in competition. The only competition is to make sure we're all achieving our missions. And so we're going to have to find, I think, also more creative collaborations that aren't just within sectors, but across multiple sectors as we think about issues like immigration and how we're going to support and protect our most vulnerable neighbors. It's not going to just happen because of frontline food providers. We're going to have to be working with other trusted sources. I was in a meeting today with a bunch of Upper West Side cultural institutions. We were all talking about all these issues. Have to think bigger about this stuff. I mean, on a policy level, right, the city and the state are going to have to step up because the federal government is not going to, right? We're going to have to step up when it comes to the financial supports people are eligible for, and we need to expand eligibility for those who need food, right? It's very simple. It's not going to happen because pantries hand out more food that we're going to actually get people food secure or nutrition secure. We're going to have more city and state funding. And I'm not just even talking about the baseline funding of CFC at the city level or what's called HIP, NAP, and Nourish at the state level. Like there's going to have to be supplemental programming. And will it be expanded state levels of funding from SNAP, things like that, and expanding eligibility? Maybe. Is there need to be, expanded state tax credits? Most definitely. Like we're going to need city council, state legislature to actually work with right governors and the mayor, and they're going to actually have to step up. And I don't think we can accept anything less. Like it's not thank you for coming to get a photo for handing out a turkey. It's what are you bringing to the table as we in the nonprofit sector bring everything we have to the table. That's what we need.
The holiday season is coming up. A lot of people will be looking for ways to help out. What's your best advice? What's most useful?
I mean, what's most useful for every nonprofit in America is for folks to give unrestricted cash dollars. And what's also most important in the longer term is to make sure we're transforming how we think about community, which means people need to volunteer, to know their neighbors, to know that actually we're a wide array of human beings. Like we need to know our neighbors better. And volunteering is a part of that, and actually making sure the next generation understands that. That's why that's why we do so much work with schools and religious institutions with volunteering at WISCA, 86th Street and 180th. We love to have people come volunteer with us. You can go on New York Care's website. We're on there, and so many organizations, whether you want to volunteer in a food pantry or in Riverside Park or wherever, no one should have an excuse to not do some sort of volunteering. And if you have the means, and I think many people do who are out there, like whatever you've given in the past, inflation is real, and your donation should go up at the same level of inflation every year.
Our executive producer, Gail, showed us the collaboration you have with Instacart. I mean, you have many of those collaborations where for the holidays, people can give a turkey or a Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, holiday dinner for an individual, a family.
Yeah, at WISCA, we have our Healthy Food Holiday Challenge where, we will give out over 10,000 turkeys, and we actually will give out about 6,000 pork shoulders, because we also a lot of our immigrant communities and families from East Asian families and some of our Latino families are like, we would much prefer a pork shoulder than a turkey, and so we're happy to give people what they want. And also we give out gift cards for folks who are vegetarian, so they can go and shop for the things that they want. Over 16,000 people are going to be served this sort of fixins for a special meal. And so we partner with lots of groups like Instacart. We have a fundraiser event, a Tavern on the Green, our Plentiful Plates event that they support. A lot of local restaurants partner with different nonprofits. Like for us, Jacob's Pickles on the Upper West Side will, if you make a donation, you'll get a free jar of pickles, in the month of December. There's lots of creative ways that businesses can also contribute and, allow people to give back. We just all have to find ways to do it. We need to.
Thank you, Greg, so much. Work you're doing and for the conversation. We're very, very happy that you are there doing this.
No problem.
And we'll see you. We're volunteering. We have another team coming on board.
Well, let us know. Let me know so I'm there when you're there.
All right. Excellent. We'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Invisible Americans podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. But we urge you to visit our website for transcripts, show notes, research, and additional information about our guests and their work. That's www.theinvisibleamericans.com. Please follow us on social media and our new YouTube channel. And our blog posts are up on Medium as well as our website. That's www.theinvisibleamericans.com.
Jeff and I will see you the next time.